Alright, welcome to the podcast. And here we go.
All right, we're back. Second podcast ever.
Yeah, boy.
It's me again, Daniel, with
And
Carl and
it's-
Ron.
Yeah,
Yeah, the boys
That's
here.
that's it.
And today we're going to be talking about a project we completed recently, recording a shoegaze band, actually. Doing a 3-track EP and demo for the band who... Are we going to leave them unnamed for now? I feel like
Yeah.
that's... Alright,
We're
we'll
not
leave them
gonna
unnamed
spill
for
the
now.
beans. You
They
just-
ain't no band.
Ooh, foreshadowing. Anyway, yeah, so we're basically just going to run through, as usual, like we did last time, the sort of process we took in recording the band. Obviously, we didn't really have much creative input when it came to composition here because they weren't our songs. So we're just going to really talk about how we recorded, how we mixed, what our experience was like, how the sessions went, general stuff like that.
Yeah, so when we first got the band in, like, they were pretty cool, like, doing whatever, and they were like, oh yeah, we're a shoegaze band, and I'm like, what the hell's shoegaze?
Yes.
It's actually it's kind of like indie rock with, like, crazy, like, pedal effects on the guitars.
That's probably the way to describe it.
Yeah, like they wanted us to add even more effects onto it in like post-production,
Yeah.
which I thought was kind of funny. But like apparently the term shoegaze comes from like a derogatory term for people that use effects pedals
Too
like
much
crazy.
just looking at the floor during their
they're looking at their
performances.
shoegazing.
Oh,
Original.
makes
Got 'em.
Alright, anyway, not really a term of derogatoriness anymore. It's more of a term of endearment. If you're
Yeah.
a shoegaze band, you're some ascended being, but
It became a genre, not an
yeah,
insult.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so like because the guitars and stuff are so affected when it actually came to recording the instruments themselves, like the first instrument we got was the bass guitar, and because just on the bass guitar itself, I think he had distortion and an overdrive pedal.
He also had some sort of phaser that he used selectively, but it wasn't on everything.
Yeah, so like just so that we could actually have some decent mixing, we DI'd it without the pedals going through it. And then we like mic'd up the amp and then the room around it as well to get some ambient noise from his amp.
Yeah, so
And,
three bass tracks overall.
I think that worked really well because it gave us like one super clean signal that we could use to like decide how crazy we wanted his effects to actually sound in the end. Because I remember when we first recorded it, he like turned on like
the
one of
overdrive?
his-
The
yeah,
overdrive, and it just peaked so hard.
We had to like re-record the bass guitar or something because the DI was actually like overloading. It's like
Yeah.
It's crazy,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
Plus the room mic was good for string sounds for the bass guitar, which really
Also,
helped.
we thought.
Yeah.
We had no idea that he was tapping his foot and humming to most
yeah.
of the songs until later on in the process. But there were still some salvageable kind of string noises that we could get out of it. So it was worth having just to have, you know.
Yeah, I think he had a
That's-
cold or something as well. There was a few sniffles.
Oh,
in there.
yeah.
We just like perfectly EQ'd just the strings, so
Yeah,
it, like
yeah.
got rid of all this tapping and everything. And I think the bass worked pretty well in the end.
It was. I think it's one of my favorite elements because it's powerful. You can hear it. It's kind of. It really is the backbone, I think, of the tracks.
Yeah, I think having the strings there really helped it, but like having them just quietly in the background didn't like make it sound like tinny or clangy because I know
Yeah.
that strings
Yeah,
kind of sound weird when they're just by themselves.
If they're too high up, it almost sounds like there's like small little clips or
Yeah.
pops going on
Yeah,
during the
exactly.
recording. So you got to be really careful about how high you mix them.
Actually, I kind of wish that we recorded the drums first because we originally were, but the drummer couldn't make it.
Oh yeah, that
apparently
happened
so.
a few times.
The
Yeah.
drummer didn't want to say no to work or something, so
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
for the first like 3 weeks of recording, I think it was, he didn't turn up at all.
It was very difficult, especially I remember some of those guitar parts.
Yeah, a bit out of time.
The lead guitarist was having trouble playing to the click. It just wasn't
Mhm.
wasn't
Yeah,
going for him. So
Yeah.
it really did slow down the process at the start there. But luckily, we still managed to find ways to be productive in those sessions.
Mm.
Like we tried to cram as much in as we could, especially. I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but especially when we booked those like massive like 6 hour, 8 hour drum sessions, only to have the drummer bail. That's a
God.
lot of time to experiment, and yeah, we
You know,
really
at times
did make the
they
most
turn
of
up
it.
late too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but we were really efficient and we whatever problems we were having, we just like quickly troubleshooted them, and
I
we
feel
just
like
worked
we
well.
worked well as a team, especially when it came to the lead guitarist, because he was the lead singer as well.
Yeah.
And he is the kind of person who gets really frustrated when things don't go exactly how he was planning it. So there was a few times where like he couldn't quite sing the right note, or he couldn't play the right part exactly how he wanted it to be, and he'd get like super frustrated. We'd tell him like, it's okay fam, go get a drink, we'll come back, we have time, which we did have time because of our 8 hour session with our drummer.
Well, yeah, I've had experience like that before with people not being in the studio, like first time being in the studio, and they're like really intimidated by like the whole environment with the desk and everything. And
he was, to his credit, he had a vision, and he was very, very polite and respectful when he was in the studio to us. Like he seemed to actually really value the time that he was in there. So.
Yeah, he would always apologize for things he didn't even need to apologize for.
Yeah.
Like, we just asked for an extra take so we had more of the same thing. We're not saying it's bad or anything. And then he's just like,
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I feel like we did a pretty good job of accommodating his personality, making him feel, well, the whole band sort of feel kind of at ease, because they all seemed very like amateur when it came to recording. It doesn't seem like they'd ever really done stuff like that in the past.
Yeah, we just made them feel comfortable. We were just all like, having some fun, joking around, but also still on track and progressing through
I feel
efficiently.
like that lightheartedness it really makes a session enjoyable. Even when you're grinding out 8 hours of, just guitars, just bass, redoing takes.
Doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, it can be a bit fun, You have half the room sort of entertaining themselves while a couple people working hard. You do a few rotations, and it's just...
Yeah.
I feel like it definitely helped that me and Dan were actually friends with one of the guitarists in the band. Like, that's the reason we even got hooked up with this band in the first place. And like, I think just knowing someone who knows that friends group, there's the link there.
Yeah.
So that there wasn't really like an awkward I don't know this person moment. It was always like
there was a connection there.
Yeah, there's a friend of a
somebody,
friend. So there's like obviously something in common that you have.
Yeah.
And I think that there was the one session where we actually got our friend to play the guitar, and we like put mood lighting on like just the lamp, and she laid underneath the drum cover blanket to keep warm. She just like laid down.
It's freezing in
there.
You should also probably mention we were recording in the Neve studio. We thought that was a good decision because we hadn't. Well, it was our first time really getting to use it, and we wanted to learn it, and it has a really, really nice sound to it.
Yeah, the Neve sounds really warm.
What better opportunity to use the Neve than to record a band who wants a kind of raw sort of sounding.
We decided to record in retro mode as well, and retro mode just gives it's part of the Neve desk, and it just gives it this flavor when recording
it's
it.
So
and
nice. It's really hard to explain. Just that certain warmth.
I think it like boosts some mids or something, but not like crazy. It's
probably
just
adds
like
a few
really
harmonics,
subtle.
like some nice harmonics up near the top, make it nice and
And the room isn't too dead or anything. It's just like a nice.
It is. It's a big enough room that you can actually get some pretty good drum sort of room ambience out of there when you use room mic.
Yeah. Actually, the drum recordings turned out extremely like clean.
Way better than
really
any
good.
other drum recordings I've done so far.
Yeah. So we should probably move on and talk about the guitar just to stay on track a bit.
Yeah.
So we talked about the bass, and so the guitar we had a small amp and we close mic'd it, and we actually recorded a lot of layers on top. And
so this was a pretty interesting process because I originally brought in my massive PV6 505. In just in case maybe he wanted to use it. I was going to use it later on in the day, so I figured why not bring it in, and if he wants to get a massive tone out of it, he can do that. But yeah, like Ron said, he wanted to use the small amp, and that provided us a few challenges, but it also allowed us to be a little bit creative in what we wanted to do afterwards, because now we had this dilemma. There's this small amp, it's got a lot of mids, not much lows. It doesn't really resonate when you close mic it. It sort of sounds almost radio-ish. But now we wanted to make it sound bigger, so just by accident, I think you or one of us, somebody here, put a room mic out in the room. We thought, maybe the room ambience will make it sound like a big, powerful amp. And, it didn't just do that on its own, but actually we had I think it was like an NT2A and a figure 8 pattern, and one side was pointed very close towards the pane glass. And what that ended up doing is it ended up resonating a certain frequency the same sort of way a massive amp shakes a room, and it ended up making it sound like it was more powerful than it actually was. It made the small amp actually seem like it was like shaking the room because it was like resonating off this glass, and it was like some unintentional sort of effect that just worked so well that we decided to keep it in. Even if we had to maybe duck it in the EQ later, it just made it sound more powerful, more raw. Less
but we
like,
did have to turn it down though. It was pretty powerful.
It was substantial, but it was also the room mic recording, so it like wasn't detrimental to our main amp recording as well. I feel like it came together well in the way that it did. It might not have worked for everything, but I feel like in the context of what we were making, that shoegaze record, a generally noisy sort of record to begin with,
it added like an ambient effect to a genre that's all about ambient effects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like
good succinct way of putting it.
Also, didn't we have a DI recording of the guitar as well?
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure we
just,
did that with all the stringed instruments. Just got as many layers as we could, just so we could pan them in every which direction, make it sound, big, huge, layered, of course.
Yeah, I know that clean signal did come through sounding a bit weird on some of them. Like some of them had a frequency, I think it was at 1K that like resonated like crazy, and we'd have like EQ it out of every single song they used that guitar for. Because we recorded all the guitars in one session. I guess there was like something going on there.
Yeah.
Because that one, it would just resonate throughout the whole track. The more you added the other instruments in, the more it would shine through.
Yeah.
I think in the end we like put it to a master bus where we just EQ'd that out of
that
everything
frequency.
collectively.
It cleaned it up though, but it still had that power behind it. It was really, really nice.
So, do you want to take us through what you did with the drums and all that? Because I remember you guys were setting up the drums and I was setting up the console at the time.
Oh yeah.
So what was the process when you set
first
up
of
the
all,
mics?
actually, that's good segue. Just quickly, our roles. Ron, you were the sort of the desk engineer for the majority of the sessions, and me and Carl were kind of like the hands that were running around fixing up any problems that we found and whatnot. And it worked really well.
Yeah.
But more on that later. Anyway, back to the drum sounds. So yeah, me and Carl were in the live room, setting up the drums. It was we had this weird sort of Frankenstein kit. When it came time to eventually record the drums, it was unfortunate, but the drummer was unable to bring in his own nice kit, so we had to use the house kits here. We managed to get a really good, the really nice kit, pretty much 90% of it, except for I think was it the floor tom, and I think the hi-hat or something.
Yeah, I don't think the hi-hats with the kits. I think they're just separate.
Yeah. So
they're just symbols.
we ended up getting like this nice kit all set up, and it was all sounding super tight and nice. And none of us are drummers. Well, Ron, you drum a little
Basic drumming, yeah.
But there was something off with that floor tom tune because it was like ding ding dong. It was like ridiculous. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
We ended up having to like crazy turn the volume of that one
down. And the drummer, when he came in, he didn't really bother to tune the drums. I don't think he had he brought a drum key with him or anything. So it was kind of we just had to work with what we had, unfortunately. But
it turned out pretty good though.
Yeah, I think it was
crisp, man.
Yeah, really, really clean recording. Like when we were setting it up, it took a while just to get like the proper miking up to the snare, like the 3-to-1 ratio.
Did that?
I think we ended up didn't we end up looking up a different miking technique and using that one?
We went through a few of them. We originally were going to do the XY directly over the top of the snare to emphasize it, but then we thought, no, it's like a shoegaze recording, it's meant to be wide and ambient, so let's use an AB stereo pair.
Yeah.
And then like we kind of had our AB stereo pair going on, and it was all right, but it was like not phasing with the snare properly. So I remember we sort of like compromised even near the end there. Like we were using XLRs to measure. It wasn't really working. We ended up getting the tape measure, and we just couldn't get it sounding right. But I remember we ended up moving one of the mics just like slightly out a bit, just slightly breaking the rules a bit, but it worked fine in the end. We ended up getting like a good sort of phase. The cymbals weren't washy, they weren't like harsh and sort of you know, when very high frequencies phase. They were all really nice. The snare still had a lot of power behind it.
I think
ended up working well.
The kick wasn't as punchy as we would have liked it to be. I'm not sure whose end that's on.
That was a strange scenario. We had
there wasn't a lot of. It had like a ring in it as well because there wasn't enough stuffing in it.
Tuned properly or something like that. It was not the nicest kick, but thankfully not a genre where the kick is something that is very, very prevalent.
Yeah.
So we got lucky in that regard.
Yeah, but when we got all that fixed up, we were all like, yeah, we've got to get to that final recording session to get down the finishing touches of all the vocals and just redoing bits.
So this is basically what we've been leading up to the whole time this band. Like the recording and processes or whatever. That's that's interesting in its own right. But this is where the lessons were learned, I guess.
Yeah. So as a rundown, in our final session, we were doing a retake of some of the lead guitar and then fixing up some of the vocals, maybe layering them a bit.
Yep.
And the session was meant to start at 8:30. We turn up at 8:30 and the bass player turns up, and so does our friend who plays guitar, came with him. And they're sitting in the studio while we're setting everything up for the guitars to be played and everything. And
the bass player didn't even have to be there.
Yeah, the bass player didn't have to be there at all, but he was there at 8:30 in the morning with his bass guitar.
Remember, these guys, very new to recording, very humble. They were trying to be taken very seriously. They really wanted to break through. They
Yeah, so the lead vocalist had nowhere to be seen. None of us are hearing anything from him. Like all 5 of us in total are messaging him. And then we get a response an hour later. He slept in, and so did his drummer, and he needed to go pick the drummer up and bring him into the session. Which
was going to take about another hour.
Yeah. So basically, we got told that it'd be 2 hours late to the session in total, and about halfway through that hour, while me and Dan are setting up in the live room still, we just see the bass player get up and like storm out of the room. And we're all like, what's going on?
And he never returned, and then we walked into the other room, and then we got the news broken to us.
Yeah, he was just all like,
it was devastating.
Screw these guys, they're meant to be here ages ago, and then like stormed out. And when old mate turns up with the drummer, he's all like, saying that his bass player has been angry texting his girlfriend and him.
A real mess. So essentially, we witnessed a band break up in the middle of our session in a way that was completely sort of under the radar, unbeknownst to us until we sort of asked about it.
Yeah.
And that's when the call was made by the band's frontrunner. He just said, I think after this we're done. And that was a little bit, I was personally just taken aback a bit. You don't really know what to do in that situation. You just kind of, you're like, we have this time left.
And
like, so you want to continue recording still, or do you want to scrap it all?
Yeah, I know when we finished that recording session, even though the band had broken up, we kind of wanted to finish up that song.
Well, we'd spent so many weeks on it by that point.
Yeah, but at that point, the lead guitarist, who was the only one we really needed to get back in to just redo some vocals maybe, he I guess just completely lost interest.
Yeah, he just sort of went MIA. I feel like he as soon as the whole band scenario stopped, he kind of just became disconnected. He was very unresponsive, because I know I was the sort of the main communication towards him, and I'd send him, I'd inquire about whether he wanted to come in for, the recording sessions. It'd only be one recording session just to finish it up this week, next week, week after. Let's just get it done. And he just kind of, it'd be days before I'd get any sort of response, and there'd always be the same sort of thing. Oh, sorry man, busy, sorry man. And it was just a shame, because we'd come so far and it was so close to the finish line, and everything sort of just fell apart.
Yeah.
Not in a way that was unrecoverable. I mean, we still had the stems. There's still a chance for us to mix.
We had like the main things that we needed. We had the vocals, drums, guitar, bass, and I don't know. The only thing we wanted to re-record was it like different verses or anything, or like dirtier versions. Or
Yeah,
something.
he wanted to add a few more guitar layers and just
Yeah.
change a couple of the lyrics or something.
Yeah, so instead we just decided like, hey, let's just make a mix with what we have now, because technically we can make the entire song that he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of the 3 songs were already done at that point. It was only
Yeah.
one of the songs he wanted to improve. So
Oh, true, yeah.
Yeah, so that's when we just decided that we would all mix one song each. So there was 3 songs in total. There was Unachievable, Bad News, and Rain.
Yep.
So Unachievable was like one of the more heavy ones.
Yep.
Bad News was more vocal heavy than instrumental heavy. And
Yeah.
then Rain was really
It was a more of a
slow
slow ambient track.
yeah.
And I think I think it was Bad News was the one that he wanted to redo a few
yeah.
of the takes on. So Unachievable and Rain were by all means good to go, done. And so yeah, did you guys want to go into the mixing process now, or did you sort of want to explain wrap up that story just before we go into the mixing process?
I thought we wrapped it up pretty well. Like,
Yeah. Or you can like each
Well,
talk about the process we went through.
just before we just sort of quickly finish up with those processes, after we ended up mixing all of the songs, I ended up sending him Unachievable back to him, and he actually ended up regaining interest, and now he's keen on coming back in and refinishing the tracks, which I guess
after we mixed it?
Yeah, after we mixed it.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. News to you? Oh, interesting. But yeah, it's interesting because now like the whole dynamics changed again. It's like our perseverance sort of paid off. We didn't really, although it would have been really easy to just kind of say, you know, like fuck it after the band broke up and get all pissy. I feel like just being sort of level-headed about it, just kind of easing them through it and slowly giving them something at the end still, so they have something to show for their work.
Yeah.
I feel like that would go a long way into getting them back into the studio in the future. You know, I feel like we really, for newbie recorders, we really like took care of them in
they
a way
definitely
that.
weren't the worst people to work.
Oh, definitely
Yeah.
not. They were very, very nice and polite. It's just a shame what happened.
Just unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when it came to mixing, I guess we'll just go through what each of us did in like the mixing process of the song, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah. Do you want me to start? Alright.
Yeah, start
Well,
with Unachievable.
That was the track that I decided to mix. It was, I don't know. Did you guys? To me, it sounded like sort of like the lead single of like the thing.
yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
the catchiest, most well written.
Yeah.
And I feel like there wasn't much that needed to be like fixed with it. There were things that could be improved, but nothing that was like inherently wrong with the recording. There was, I think, 2 perfect like different guitars that were panned left and right, plus a lead guitar, vocals in the middle, hard panned, you know, drum overheads, all the standard stuff. We generally compressed a lot of the drums just to get them to cut through the mix a tad better, and we followed that up with you know, side chaining the kicks with the kick with the bass. As we said, the bass was quite overpowering, so having the kick side chain to the bass helped the kick to cut through, even though it wasn't, you know, exactly the sound we wanted. Helped clean up the mix, because even though it was noisy, we didn't want it to be muddy.
Yeah.
The
Didn't want it
guitars were harsh, dissonant, sort of. The tones were a little bit, you know, messy, wild, but it sort of worked for the recording. So it wasn't something that you really wanted to reel in, because it would take the power away from the song and whatnot. And, you know, same goes for the lead guitars. There was a lot of times where he'd just let it feed back and ring out, and rather than cut that out, it thematically worked with the song so well. And especially at the start, maybe if you hear it playing in the background, if Carl does that,
I'll do
Carl
that.
puts it in the background,
I'll do it.
you might hear that at the start of Unachievable, there's a feedback that leads it in along with the stick count before it all kicks in, and it just has so much impact. And I feel like we really hit the nail on the head with what we wanted, with what they wanted for that track, especially because Carl, you ended up doing the effects for that track.
Yeah, we ended up reverbing the guitars more than he had already let them ring out.
Yeah.
And because we like chucking the reverb on that definitely like made them sound naturally ringing out, and it wasn't just room noise ringing out like it was before we put reverb on it. So I think it made it more controlled. Like, it wasn't too crazy. It like made it nice and like it fit with the whole genre of effects.
It even brightened it up a bit. I remember, especially on the clean guitar.
Yeah, because I remember that some of it had like some weird frequencies out in the middle of nowhere, and I think the reverb like killed them down a bit, so it made it feel more smooth
for sure,
rather than like. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, my job when you guys were doing that was to get pizza. So, I was picking up the pizza.
Ron the pizza guy.
The pizza guy. So, you gotta...
That is a necessity.
You gotta keep the...
Man's gotta eat.
Feed the creative mind. Well, not really. Creativity and
But
mixing.
you did something interesting with your track, though, when you came back to mix it. Rain.
Yeah. So what I started with was just, basic automation, just quick overview. I wasn't particularly familiar when mixing with these bands, so you came in to help and gave me some tips and tricks. But the
it's
main
still very
thing,
much your mix, but I just came in
and showed me some like really good techniques.
Tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks by Daniel Havard. But the main thing that was bothering and really just like giving me a headache when mixing that, there was a certain frequency around like, what was it? It was like around 100 to like 500 hertz or something like that, close to the mid range, and it was really loud. It was like in almost all the recordings. Like it was in
just
like,
for that song though. It was so strange. It was only for that song.
It was weird.
And for the song that was meant to be most ambient, it really it needed to go because it was detracting from like the serenity of the song. It was starting to make it just uncomfortable.
And it was just like clashing and like I don't know. It was like I cut it like a lot, and then you came in, you heard it as well, and then
cut it some more.
Yeah, we cut it like even way more. So that was the major problems I had with mixing that one.
But that's where a bit of the creative input came in as well, because I remember Rain, he wanted it to be ambient. There's only one thing you can do in that situation.
Yeah. Carl, bring in a real sick sample. Provide them sick samples,
that
boy.
Sample off of freesamples.org. And we cut it so it looped. It was just like this really satisfying.
It was like the perfectly timbred Rain sample. It wasn't too and it wasn't too. It was like right in the middle.
It didn't sound like white noise. It's just this nice, like, I'm pretty sure while Ron was mixing it, I was just spacing out, listening to this Rain while it happened. Yeah. By the end of it, he had mixed it so that it was there, but it wasn't the attention. Yeah. But it
adds so much character to the track.
And it fits the name.
Yeah, of course. And I remember even in the studio, back when we were recording it, old mate said that he wanted something like that in the track. So
yeah, I remember in the vocal recordings, he was like scrunching paper to be Rain.
Yeah. He was scrunching paper throughout the recordings, and I was like, when I was
how about we just cut that out and replace it with some real sounding Rain?
Yeah, but it was like pissing me off because like, what do you call it? I don't know. I didn't know he was like doing that to be like, yeah, you guys can use this for Rain or something. I thought he was just doing it to like, can you not do that or something? Because I remember before I was recording, and I told him, I was like, oh, try not to scrunch the paper when you're singing the lyrics. And then he was scrunching the paper throughout the recording, like, what's this guy doing?
But yeah, unfortunately there's not much else to talk about post-mortem with this, because obviously the band's not together. They didn't end up releasing it, so it's sort of only really something we can just put in our own portfolios now. So
like my song that I mixed before Dan rudely stopped me talking about the song that I mixed.
I'm sorry, I
apologize. Piece of trash.
I apologize.
Get out of here. My podcast now. Yeah, so I mixed Bad News. We used to call it the Friends song. Yeah. Because the lead guitar sounds like the guitar from the Friends intro. That's the one.
Every time, ever since you said that, it just doesn't.
I actually EQ'd it to fit as close to that as possible, because it actually fit the mood better if it sounded like that.
It was nice and boppy.
Yeah. And another thing I did was with it. In the studio that I was in, the left speaker, the stand that it's on, there's a certain frequency somewhere in the mid-range where it like vibrates like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I had initially done it, I like EQ'd this massive section out of guitars, and I was like, okay, cool. Because I thought the speaker was like dying because of this like feedback or something. Yeah, but then it turns out that it's just this one speaker wobbling. So I actually panned it all the way to the right to EQ that one, so I knew exactly what it sounded like. So when I put it back over, when it came to putting effects on things, I actually reverbed just the DI separately. Reverbed and delayed just the DI of our left and right guitars. Because what I found was just panning it left and right, because it was such like a it was like a almost banjo sounding guitar.
Yeah.
And it had like one really solid sound. When you panned it left and right, it just sounded like two separate incoherent guitars.
Yeah, you know that's true because it doesn't have the ambience to go with it.
Yeah, so I reverbed and delayed just the DI, and then I turned the DI signal up, and then put like the amp volume kind of medium, and then the room volume down.
Yeah.
And and then when you panned it, it kind of gave the guitars like a ton of body, so they actually filled out the area rather than just being like a single source of sound over there. I remember the snare for that track was really like clangy. So
those drums were so like they were so inconsistent from recording to recording. Like the snare would sound good in one and the kick would sound good in another, but they wouldn't sound good in the same recording. It was so strange.
Yeah, so Dan came in and like told me like this EQ trick to make the snare sound cool, but just did the whole kick drum to the bass to get it to come through. But other than that, I guess that snare trick.
If anyone's wondering, it's here you go, Dan's secret tips. Don't share this with your friends. No, it's usually a very generous high shelf boost on the snare. It might not sound like a natural snare. It might sound more like a produced snare, but it just cuts through. A high shelf boost on the snare cuts through so good. And you match that with a low shelf, of course, with your high and low pass filters to taper off the extremes. And it's just got so much body, but also snap behind it once you do that. Like usually I like to do around 4 to 6 dB. I feel like that is where it works best. And because it's such, snare's such a rapid sound that it doesn't really matter if for the moment that it's hit, it like, covers everything because it's so fractional in the amount of time that it takes up.
And I know that if you take out too much of the high end, it stops having that clang to it and sounds more like a doo.
Yeah.
It sounds like a
nice.
Retarded tom or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's some sick mixing discussion that we got going on here. So that's
sick. Like I was saying, I think we're ready to move on from this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much else post-mortem, unfortunately, for this because, we could only really put this on our personal profiles. We can't release it because it's their music under their name, and if they don't want to release it, unfortunately there's not much we can do about it. So there's not much, industry sort of interaction that went on after this. Hopefully they come back for future recordings, maybe frontman solo project or our guitarist friends.
Yeah.
Next band,
That'd be good. I'd be keen to work with them again.
They'll get a new bass player probably. Well, until then, laters, people.
Thanks.
Well, you've been watching the
hold on. Not yet.
podcast. Wait.
I got the daily puns ready. So, music. Hold on.
I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna press stop.
Without music, life would be flat.
Let's talk about the podcast.
The podcast. Ron's gonna say goodbye to. Bye.